Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Adele Gambardella and Chip Massey, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
It's a real pleasure to be sitting down with both of you. You're joining me from the DC and New York areas. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about what most convincing people do to forge a lasting bond. This is a fun topic for me because relationships really do matter. Relationships matter, of course, in our personal lives, but they matter in business. They matter in our organizations. And if you want to have a successful career, it's built on relationships, right? And relationships are built on trust. And so if you want to go anywhere in life, you have to be able to forge lasting bonds built on trust. So I'm super excited to tap into your wisdom, your insights, and your vast experience. As we get started, I wanted to share some bios with the audience. Adele Gambardella, honored as a woman who means business, has over 20 years of experience owning and managing her own private top PR firm in Washington, D.C. She has run PR campaigns for U.S. President Joe Biden, the CEO of Lockheed Martin, Marillyn, Hewson, and many more. Adele has spearheaded major crisis PR campaigns for brands such as SAP, Verizon, and Johnson Johnson. She has also been invited to speak at the United Nations twice, where she's given 2 speeches on crisis communications. I could share a whole lot more about Adele, but I'm going to pause there. Chip also has an amazing background, an ex-FBI hostage negotiator and special agent for 22 years. He has investigated 9/11 terrorist attacks and led the New York FBI office's crisis negotiations team in all 5 bureaus. As the co-owner of the convincing company, he teaches executives and their teams how to apply the FBI's techniques to every workplace scenario. Clients include C-suite executives at Fortune 500 companies, including Facebook, Samsung, and Goldman Sachs. And again, Chip, I could say a whole lot more about you, but I'm going to pause there and give both of you the opportunity to just highlight anything else about your backgrounds, and then we'll dive on into the conversation.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Anything else you would like to share?
No, I don't think so.
No?
That covers it.
Okay, very good. Well, you both really do have really interesting, diverse backgrounds, which, is compelling to me. PR for all these different executives and political figures, hostage negotiations, FBI. First of all, how did you get together?
So we met at an entrepreneurial dinner, and I had my own public relations firm for about 15 years prior to meeting Chip, and I had a staff of about 15 people, and I eventually sold that business. And then wanted to go out and sort of do something different, hang my shingle and be more of a thought leader in the industry. And I was out one night and I heard Chip do his bio of like FBI hostage negotiator. I was like, wow, like that would be such a cool combination in a crisis firm, in a PR firm, to have somebody with his background. And we started talking, and but Chip tells it a little bit differently than me.
She hasn't hit it yet, John. So she was asking me questions about what I learned at Quantico, what I learned in the field, both as an agent and hostage negotiator. And after period of time, she goes, "You know what? We're good to go." And I said, "Good to go what?" She says, "Well, we're going to put on a master class," and this was like August, right? I said, "Okay." And she said, "We're going to do it in New York City." I said, "Sure." And she said, "We're going to do it in 3 months." And we did. And that's, she sold it out. That's kind of like Adele. She works at light speed. She has like ideas all the time. And so we did that. We did it again in DC, same thing. And then COVID hits. Right. And
great timing.
You know this, John, right? It's like, okay, in-person events are down. And so Adele says, "You know what? We're going to use this time. We're going to write a book."
Mm.
And that's exactly what we did.
When he
So
tells this story, Jonathan, I feel like it makes me sound rather bossy, but I think I think my
ambitious,
I
ambitious.
think my
There's a
perspective is a
difference, right,
little
A-type
John?
personality, right?
Yeah.
convincing,
Yes,
not
Convincing. That's
bossy.
the name of the game, right? Great partnerships come about in all different ways. This is fun. It's fun to hear, how this one came about.
Yeah.
And yeah, COVID hit at not the most opportune time for anybody, right? But certainly when you're starting a new partnership and speaking events and all those sorts of things. But hey, out of that comes a great book, the opportunity to really put all of your good thinking down in a different medium to be able to share with people. So that's wonderful, and that's a great outcome. My little COVID project was this podcast.
Nice.
I'd been consuming podcasts for years. I'd been guests on podcasts, a number of times, and then I'm like, yeah, I miss talking to people. I miss traveling, and well, why don't I continue that? I'll just do that via podcast, and then 5 years later, podcast that started off just small and organically grew into something that has been just a whole lot of fun. So, we all have our interesting paths, don't we?
it's a
We
fact.
certainly do. And I have to say, starting a crisis communications firm during the pandemic was also sort of interesting because
Hmm.
everyone is in a crisis. I mean, I had a crisis firm before and we were like, oh, this is good. We'll just parlay this all in. And I will say that we very bad timing wise worked with the Infectious Disease Society of America right before the pandemic hit to prepare them for crises. And they were like the number two spokespeople about the issue because they were so prepared to take on the pandemic. So bad timing for us, good timing for them. They were prepared. So but when everybody was having a crisis, it was difficult to want to
Yeah.
get people to go, okay, yeah, let's plan for it. Let's talk about what you're going to say. So we again took the opportunity to go, well, what does crisis management really teach businesses? And what it teaches them is how to be convincing in high pressure situations, but it also teaches them to be rapid responders,
Hmm.
regardless of what the issue is, whether it's positive or negative. So putting those principles to work both in our book and in our business actually wound up being something that was really fruitful for us. So, sometimes out of horrible things come, great business ideas as this podcast was, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I want to, tag on to something you were saying and pivot a little bit because you were joking, oh, I'm coming across as sounding bossy. Well, no, I mean there's a big difference between someone who's bossy and bullying to get stuff done. We've all been there. We've all been with bosses who are pushy and bossy and micromanaging and kind of exploitative and we've been around people like that, right? And that's one thing. Being convincing is something totally different, right? Get, getting stuff done via influence and via relationships is totally different
It is.
than being bossy and controlling and pushy.
Right.
You're not building relationships when you're being bossy, bullying, and pushy. It's the opposite. You might be able to get stuff done in the short term, but long term, you're not going to get anything done because you're blowing up relationships, and you're chewing through people,
Right.
and so you're going to have to like find new people constantly to be able to get the stuff done that you want to get done, right? So,
Absolutely, totally agree with you on that. And it's interesting, right? I mean, I think being a woman in business, there that comes with sort of some, heavy I think expectations that bossy is a bad thing. And
mm,
I can tell you though, I have a daughter who's 12 and I have a son who's 10. And when she was in preschool, I said, Why not give Sienna a little bit of a leadership position? I think she'd be good." And her teacher was like, "We don't want to give her that kind of power."
oh,
She had already she had already seen that she had some leadership qualities, but maybe we need to tone some of those down a bit. But hey, having an entrepreneur for a mom has got to be a bit of a balance there.
that's fun. So let's talk more about convincing. Let's talk about like what that looks like for you in the work that you do. How do you become more convincing? And why is it that these individuals that foster that, who foster convincing approaches and more influence, why are those the ones that have these lasting bonds, more stronger relationships, stronger trust bonds.
Chip, do you want to go?
Sure. I
Mhm.
think, and John, you've talked about this and written about this at length. The idea that when you take a real, authentic interest in another person, uh, bringing to bear your empathy, the idea that everyone that comes into your life, whether it's work or personal, whatever it is, everyone wants to be heard and seen. And so, what we know is that leaders that take on this kind of mindset, this kind of persona where they're trying to put that other person before themselves, they are
Hmm.
trying to understand them, right? At a level that no one else has. And here's what we mean by that. We got an idea about this very deep listening technique. We call it forensic listening, and it's composed of four components, and it's about their voice, the pitch, tone, and cadence of a person's voice that's in front of you. What are they? How are they communicating that? What is that voice telling you? And the themes they're developing in front of you, which can be completely different from why they originally wanted to talk to you. And if
Hmm.
it's repeated more than once, it's important to them, so it better be important to you. And then there's another component, which is their body positioning, and we differentiate that from body language, and that we're all creatures of our environment, and we move and gesticulate about that, so it's not static. And so you have to watch how that person's interacting at different points of your conversation. And then the fourth is the idea is what emotion is being present? How is it that, where are they connecting on the theme? Are they up, down? Does it seem where their energy is kind of manifesting around? So we use that as a way to help people when we start working with them to really dial into that other person, and they get this system. Because what we say about forensic listening, John, is that it's the art and science of analyzing a conversation after it's happened, because we
Hmm.
believe words leave clues.
Yeah, and John, just to add to what Chip's saying as well, like you have a lot of people who use these AI note takers now,
Yeah.
and those are great for a variety of things. It's great for next actions, but what we say is really take a focus on the emotional aspects of the conversation in this in these four with these four categories, and then follow up in such a way that the person feels so seen and heard
Hmm.
that the next conversation that you have with them is so interesting and so engaging for them because you've listened at such a level that they've never been heard before. And that creates a relationship that makes you just so much more convincing. I mean, how many times, and I'll ask you this question, how many times in your career has somebody followed up with such detail and such, an interest in you to say, John, what you said to me 2 weeks ago, it really made an impact. When you focused on this area, gosh, I was so fascinated by that, and I just want to really tell you that the story that you told me around that, it stayed with me, and I'd love to connect more. And that kind of follow up is rare in business
Yeah.
because most people don't listen at that level. And so your ability to be convincing and influential because you take an interest in someone else, it sounds so simple, yet so few people do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, you have to listen carefully, right? You have to be attentive to be able to pick those things up. You have to care genuinely, to be able to like not just notice it in the first place, but to like take it in and to like hold it within you, and to then be able to share it back later, especially if you're talking like 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
and to even remember it and to be able to share it. And so, yeah, stuff like that just doesn't happen that often, and especially with casual relationships. So when it does happen, you feel like this is something special. Like this is someone who it's not just a casual, workplace acquaintance. This is someone who genuinely cares about me. Like maybe we
Right.
don't know each other outside of work, but at least within work, they genuinely care about me, and they value me, and they have interest in me and in my career and my ability to succeed and etc. Right? And that's
Yeah.
different than like 99% of our interactions that we have.
That's what
Mhm.
we say too. If you do this one thing, you'll be the top 1% of your industry because just most people won't do it at this level. They
And
don't
it's not, to
yeah,
clarify too, it's not because other people don't care. You know,
right.
I think most people do care. I think most people, are good people and they wander around, just trying to make it through their days. But,
Mhm.
most people are so overwhelmed and busy and burning, the candle at both ends and, all of these things that we just, maybe we don't prioritize it or we just don't feel like we have the bandwidth or whatever the reason, right? There's a gazillion reasons why it doesn't happen. But if we can find a way to prioritize it, give ourselves the bandwidth, put aside the energy, whatever needs to happen, so that we can do that
Mm.
at least within our at least within a smaller sphere of like people we interact with, on a regular basis. It's just gonna be huge, especially with our team. Like it's gonna make a big difference.
It really does. And the other thing I would say is you have to have discipline to be an influential person or a good convincer. I mean, you really do. And there is a process to convince people that we can get into a little bit later. But essentially, the one thing is to not start with your strongest point first.
Hmm.
Which is so counterintuitive to most people, right? Don't start with your strongest point first. Most of us want to go into a meeting, state our opinion, and then like 10 seconds later, we want everybody to close their books is like, wow, John is so right about that. Adele is so right about that. Chip is brilliant. Which is 10 seconds and you're done and the meeting's over. That never happens because when you start with your strongest point first, what it does is it just makes people dig their heels into whatever they believe is true or not true about what you just said. So instead of having people who have an open mind and an open mindset, they have a closed mindset. And so we're just all taught to go in and start with our strongest point first. But what you really want to do is start with a point of agreement. And the way you know what that point of agreement is the step before we just talked about, which is to listen at a level where you know what the point of agreement is, so you could bring that into any conversation. And so these steps really do build on each other.
I love that. And the other aspect of that, and maybe it's partially the same thing you've already said, but I'm thinking about recent meetings that I've been in, challenging meetings where there's challenging issues that need to be dealt with and debated and resolved. And yeah, people come in with vastly different opinions. And, if I go in, and I feel like the data's on my side and the argument's on my side and all of those things, and all I have to do is present the good argument with the good data, and, people will come around because I have everything on my side. Yeah, to your point, it just doesn't work that way because people have an emotional attachment to their own perspective. They also think they're smart and they think they have good arguments. And what happens is if I just go out the gate with all of that, they sit there, they kind of weather the storm. They
Yep.
listen to me, or whatever. They let me say whatever I'm going to say. They kind of get through it, and then they launch into their thing, right? And then they just figure, okay, we gave John his chance, and now we're going to launch into our thing, and we don't have to even pay attention to John anymore because he already did his thing, right?
Right,
And
right.
and that it's just a ridiculous back and
It's so
forth,
silly.
right?
Yeah,
Because
it never
neither of
works.
us are really listening to each
Mm-mm.
other in that kind of a dynamic. And when really what needs to happen is we just all need to be able to go in. We all need to be open to different perspectives. We all need to, come to some sort of an agreement that we're going to try to, make a data informed decision. What are our priorities? Set some ground rules. Like those are the types of things that are going to help us come to good decisions. Yet most of the time we don't do those things, right? We just go in from, as soon as the gates open and we launch into trying to convince everyone of our point.
Yes. And it never works. It never works. It just makes people dig their heels in more. It really does. Yeah.
I think as I think more about this idea of the lasting bond, I think of sustainability, I think of long-term relationships, and one thing that's interesting in the modern world of work is that not many things are long term
Mm.
in the modern day and age, right? So at least not in like the modern workplace. People turn over rapidly, they switch jobs, they switch organizations rapidly. And so I can just hear, some people in the audience thinking out loud saying, well, I'm only going to be in this company for 1 to 2 years anyways. Why invest? Why emotionally invest? Why spend the time and energy building these relationships, doing the stuff you're talking about? Because I'm just going to be gone in 2 years, and then I'll just have to redo it, the whole thing again at the next place. What would be your response to that?
One of the interesting things that we found when we were doing research for the book, John, was that you're exactly putting your finger on this issue that's the changing culture. And, it's no longer you're at the same place for, 20 years in the watch at the end. It, but the other side of that is that you're going to, chances are, as a result of your, needing to go on to the next organization to get a promotion or a raise or whatever that job role is and function that you really want and need to in order to separate yourself from your previous organization, is that we're all changing. We're all moving around, and there's a good chance that you're going to see that person or people again, right? You could come in as a consultant to that same company that you were just at. And so it's that same kind of deposits that you've been making, right? And I know you're an advocate of this, John, is that you're putting in those deposits into that person, into that entity, whatever it is, as it is your contribution. You are known for that thing. That's another thing that we talk about, right? Is how to do brand building of your own personal brand. And when we are consciously doing that, we know that, okay, it may not show up in a month, a year from now, but those dividends will pay out eventually. So there's a great chance that your reputation really will precede you.
I love that. And that's certainly been my experience.
Hmm.
Now I'm in a unique situation. I'm a professor. It's one of the most consistent, stable types of jobs that there is. I've been at my university for 17 years. I may be here for another 20 years, before I retire. And I do consulting work too.
Hmm.
And so, I pop into other organizations all the time. But I am the unique one in the modern world of work, that I am, likely going to stay at this one institution for 35, 40 years, right? But most people aren't doing that anymore. And so, yes, I can establish relationships with people that I'm going to be working with for years and years and years and years. But most people, they aren't. And so, on the one hand, you're thinking in the short term, because you're only going to be there in the short term, why invest? Why it doesn't matter? But your point is so important, that our careers are long. Our careers, we tend to loop back. Like we tend to interact with people multiple times. And even though I'm at the same institution, there still is turnover, and people still do leave and go other places. And I can't tell you the number of times that those deposits that I've put in with people that, then I don't interact with again, and then like 10, 15 years later, all of a sudden it pops back up that I have this relationship with this person that I haven't really interacted with a whole lot in a decade. And now all of a sudden some new opportunity arises. But because I had genuine interactions and meaningful
Hmm.
relationships with those individuals, now there's really new great opportunities for partnership, collaboration, or whatever, or a new consulting gig, whatever the case may be, because I invested, a decade earlier, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
so we just have to be willing to do the work and have a long-term perspective, and just trust in it. Like, it may not pay off today, 6 months, a year from now, it may not be 5 years from now, it may be a decade from now. But man, I sure can attest to it. My own experience. That sure has been what I've seen. And it sounds like both of you can attest to that.
Hmm.
And I suspect a whole lot of other people could give testimonials around that as well.
John, I have a funny story. Chip and I were at a speaking engagement, and I was talking to the CEO of the organization. It was a fireside chat about personal brand, building your personal brand. And I had said where I went to college. And there was someone in the audience who walked up to me and says, I rode crew with you in college. I was like, oh my gosh, really? We did? And he says, yeah. He's like, you don't remember me? I was like, I'm sorry, I can't place you. And he's like, how about this guy? And he was bald, and in the
Uh,
picture, he had this like big blonde hair. And I was like, I remember that guy. I don't remember you. But he worked for a big company. He wound up bringing us in. It's like you don't even know what deposits you're making. And you could be making these deposits when you're younger. You could be, I mean, and I just think they always come back around. If you treat people well, that is the best, foundation for convincing, because people remember how you treat them. And if you treat people well, it really will benefit. I mean, that sounds so cliche, but it really is a huge part of being convincing is being likable, is being somebody wants to help.
yeah.
And I think many of us are not taught that necessarily in our professional career. It's like, just
Mm,
be a driver, be someone, I mean, and you should be that, but you should also be helpful and be
Yeah.
and be nice to begin with. And that's really going to pay off in dividends later. So
Yeah.
it might
Absolutely.
not seem it, but
Absolutely. Well, Chip, Adele, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
yeah, so you can connect with us at convincingcompany.com, and you can join some of our online courses. We offer a course on crisis communications, on personal branding, as well as consulting and crisis communication work. So I hope that you guys take a look. And also, please, please, please get a copy of our book. I think you'll find there's some really great practical strategies in it that you can use in your everyday business.
Wonderful. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Chip and Adele can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.